Hello everyone, time for an update on the Trek car build. It's been a while since the last video, and although it may not look like a lot has been done, I have put a lot of hours into the car since the last video. Subframe's still on the floor, but a lot of small stuff that's very time consuming has been done in the engine bay. We have the ABS pump is installed along with all those small lines. And over here you can see the brake boosters in, new master cylinder and reservoir. The master cylinder is actually an E65, which is an upgrade for the E39. Gives better brake pad or brake feel. The only thing you have to do is add this adapter to this line, M12 to M10, which all the lines on the E39 are M10 by 1. So you have to just adapt that down and bend the line a tiny bit, but really pretty much plug and play. So that's done. You can also see a new clutch slave cylinder here. Have that on and tied up out of the way, but this kind of closes off the hydraulic system because I'm assuming that I will get to the point of putting fluid in maybe before the transmission's in. And actually, this may be a little easier to bleed as well. While we're in here, I also had to replace, or not replace, but install this upper line here that was missing. If you recall, this was a parts car, so that line must have been sold. Someone probably stripped theirs out on this end here where the unions are, which kind of plays into this second set of lines here. They were cut on this car, so I had to acquire those as well. Also, while we're in here, I cleaned up and painted this bracket. It was kind of faded and had a little corrosion on it. These are mounts from McMaster car. It's kind of an upgrade from the stock mounts. I have 2 more for the power steering reservoir as well. The stock BMW ones only last a few years, it seems, and they're super expensive and just really not worth the cost. Also in the engine bay, other things that'll never be noticeable except if I point them out is this line here, part of the body harness, has actually been or was cut, and I had to solder all the wires back together. For some reason they cut that. I want to say it was for the AC compressor connector and line, which is just a single wire, so I don't know why they had to cut the whole piece there. They could have just cut that single wire where it kind of leads off, but in any case, all of them were cut, so they're now soldered back together because they are important. The blue connector is for the wheel speed sensor. At least that one's important. The other connector here is for the headlight level sensor, which may or may not even be put back in. You can also see here that the stainless steel line is on, but not tight. That's so that I can get it positioned correctly for the caliper when the time comes. But since this all got cleaned up, well, I know it doesn't look like it on camera, but everything is degreased and cleaned up as best as possible. I wanted to get this line on because otherwise the steel brake line is just pointing straight up. Perfect opportunity for dirt and grime and moisture or water or whatever to get in the brake line, and certainly don't want that. So this is actually the same on all 4 corners. I have all 4 stainless lines loosely installed, but I also marked all 4 because when you get into thrashing and wrenching, sometimes you can forget to tighten one, even though you knew on the other corners that you had to tighten them. It's easy to forget these things, or it can be, so it's just worth noting that on the car. As you can see, we also have the wipers back on. Seems trivial or minor, but that cowl had to be replaced. It was all cracked up, and that lets extra water down in and eventually can get on the wiper motor excessively. So I had to have all that taken apart. I cleaned it up and took those parts from the other car. Here, they're relatively new, and I'd rather put relatively new on the track car and brand new back on this car once it's restored to that point. Moving on, so a lot done up here. I guess one more thing is those lines I replaced that were cut, those go to the pre-charge pump, which is right down here. So that's all reinstalled as well with the horns, and is ready to go. Same in here, fender liners, they just cracked to a million pieces. So obviously those are out, but I did get some cheap aftermarket ones that others have said fit well enough. And that's all I need in the front, is really just to keep the rain away from some components in the front, namely that pre-charge pump and the horns. It's good to have that area closed up. And actually, even more so for the front, the intake filters are going to be in each corner in the front. You'll be seeing that in a future episode when we get to there. But moving on, a lot more work going on here in the interior. Both front doors the vapor barriers have been resealed, door panels on. I got some basically free door panels to slap in here. All I really needed is something that's gonna bolt up nice and firm, house my switches, and obviously the door handle. No speakers. I think I mentioned previously all the radio components have been removed. No need for that. But like I said, kind of important to have some of this weather stripping and convenience of a door handle. So those are done, cleaned up. Also different from the last time we looked at the car. The dash is back in, center console is in, e-brake handle has been swapped out. The one that was in the car was busted, so I removed and replaced that as well. And kind of cool, we now have an instrument cluster. I was able to acquire one and have it sent out along with the EWS module and the LCM, which is on the other side and already bolted back in, to have them all coded together. The EWS and LCM store mileage, and those two modules were original to the car, which is great because the cluster was not, and that allowed me to have the cluster coded to the car and have the mileage be correct. For what that's worth, who knows? Obviously this is a track car build, but that may not last forever, and I think having the mileage correct is going to be relatively important, at least if I ever sell it. I mean, even if I sell it as a track car, a potential buyer may not want to keep it that way, and it'd be a selling point. But also pretty cool, E39 M5 geek fact. This black face cluster is 1 year only. This is for the 2000s, or at least for North America, 2000 only gauge cluster. So pretty quote unquote rare as far as number of cars, but even more so because they had an issue with pixels on these. So BMW did a lot of goodwill replacements on these as well after warranty, and all the replacements are the facelift gray face gauges, similar to in E46 M3, etc. So pretty neat. I wasn't specifically looking for that, but I came across one in my search and was able to acquire it. As you can see, we have some clutch and brake switches here along with pigtails, which is never a good sign. And that's because the wiring was cut. So that's going to be a huge pain in the butt to get up under there and solder those pigtails back in. You know, arguably I don't need the clutch switch ones. I can loop those, but I'm still just gonna do it. I'd rather, if I'm gonna be up there anyways, I'm just gonna do all of them and have it be, you know, as stock, so to speak. So get those done, and then I can put together the rest of this stuff that's all ripped apart still. Just wanted to make sure our access is as good as possible to get to that wiring, but I'm not looking forward to that. That pretty much covers the interior. The main power cable, which you can see here, that's been replaced. It had a couple nicks and cuts in the insulation, a spot in the back by the battery, and up here where 2 holes were drilled in the floor to drain water previous to my ownership. So I had to cut the carpet out on this side too so that I could get all the way to the front. But that's fine. That carpet's pretty heavy. If I have time, I'm going to build a little floor plate in the front to cover up those electronics for the passenger. Got to keep my instructors comfortable. But if I don't have time, I still kept that piece of carpet. It dried out. It had some moisture in it, but it's dried out now. So in the short term, I can always slap that piece back in because I don't need people kicking the main power cable and grounds, and that white box is a big power junction box. So for the same reason, best to keep those covered. Moving on to the back, the rear subframe's in. Hooray, hooray. Rear suspension is not complete, obviously. There's no coilovers in yet, but everything on the rear subframe is done. All new bushings everywhere, new control arms. So those ball joints are new. The main big ball joints are new. PowerFlex bushings everywhere except these integral links. I do have those, but I decided to just run the new links for now. That's really kind of a minor point of deflection, so it's not going to make a noticeable difference by not having the PowerFlex bushings in there yet. But new wheel bearings, as we kind of covered, got the wheel studs in, axles are in. Best to do all that while everything was out of the car. I also had to replace, it's hard to see, but I had to replace sections of the rear brake lines. They weren't really corroded except for when you get down to the nut, of course. Right at the end, they were seized pretty hard onto the old rubber lines here. And so they were basically stripped and were going to strip out. So I just decided to replace those sections, which we'll look at on the other side here when we get over there. Other small details, you know, things that just add up but kind of needed to be done. I had the taillights out. There's just so much dirt and grime back there. And I replaced the sealing gaskets. They're super cheap, and it is a source of water egress if you don't replace them. They were definitely original to the car. Can't tell for sure if they're leaking, but it's just one of those things that everything was out to get cleaned and whatnot, so why not just take care of it. In the trunk area, we can see I got a big hole in the floor. I removed the battery box and the big cubby storage area. I actually built a custom plate to replace that storage area. And then obviously the battery box will go back in. But I'm leaving them out for now. It just makes access to things easier back here. You can kind of see a stud sticking down. That's for a muffler mount. So I'm going to chase all those threads before I install those. So again, just easier access for stuff back here. And it's, probably a 20-minute job to get the weather stripping in and bolt down these 2 pieces to cover that back in. So not worried about that. It also made yesterday's job super easy. I was able to climb up in there and be that much closer to the rear shock towers so that I could install this rear strut brace. Super easy with everything this far apart. It was like a 20-minute job. Never gonna experience that again, probably. But yeah, super happy with how quickly that went in. Still kept the audio wiring for now. That's just really tied up, nice and tight on the sides. Someday maybe that'll come out, but for now, everything's tied up and secured, and really just about done in the back here. Just to finish up on the rear subframe work and the stuff back here, we can see, yep, there we go. There's one of the unions. I cut the line here because the lines were clean, and I was able to just run and bend a short piece to here, and you can't see the other union probably, but it's right next to this one and runs across the back of the trunk over to the other side. We'll see how good my flaring work is once we put fluid in and pressurize the system, but knock on steel that they're going to hold, and I don't have to redo them because that would be a pain. But anyways, just to wrap things up, I recently acquired a used set of mufflers. Those showed up on Friday. They already look pretty clean, so I don't think I'm gonna really do anything to them. Obviously I have to put the mounts on, but everything's nice and clean already, and the slip fit, I'll have to see once everything's in if I can just utilize that right from the get-go with some clamps, some wide band clamps, or if I'm gonna have to fabricate some stuff. But here's the full exhaust. We're basically looking at everything, or we are looking at everything. Like I said, I may need to fabricate some joints and connections to make things a little easier or line up better, but it's all here, which leads to the last new really cool item. I got a really good deal on these Evolve headers, a smoking deal from a friend of mine. Brand new, they were in the box before I took them out. Came with test pipes where the cats normally go, and those are also nice slip fit clamp design. Should be the correct length. Hopefully they will line up with the Super Sprint X pipe, and again just make the exhaust practically a bolt-in deal. Not that I'm expecting that, and I'm totally fine with having to weld some joints and connections, but hopefully that's going to be a time saver. So that's pretty much it. I'm sure I forgot about half a dozen or a dozen small things that I did to get to this point, but there's a pretty solid update. We got the Epic Journey also having some work done. It's up on the stands. I need to get the rear diff out, the rear coilovers, and that's pretty much it. I got the front suspension out and swapped stock suspension into that car just temporarily. So we got the front coilovers are out and ready to go in, the adjustable sway bar links. So that'll be coming up soon. I'll get the new tie rods in and wheel bearings onto the front spindles and brake shields. All that stuff is ready to get assembled on here. Just need to have the time. And as always, the amount of time will grow, but your mileage may vary.